So, hello everybody. Today I'm going to do a little bit of a sit down about a role-playing game called Vaesen, which was published by Free League. It goes by the byline Nordic Horror Role-Playing, and I'll go into detail about what I think about the term Nordic Horror later. At the moment, at the time I'm making this video, you can get the basic rulebook, which is the book that I'm showing you. You can also get a Game Master's screen. You can also get a collection of adventures. You can also get a card set, and I think you can also still get the custom dice. First of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the setting. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the system. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about my thoughts on it. So first of all, the setting is 19th century Sweden, and more specifically the city of Uppsala. Uppsala at that point had burnt down multiple times over its history, and it is a city at the time that's being industrialized towards the late 19th century. And the premise is that there is a secret society that deals with discovering information, collating information about the so-called Vaesen, which are not entities you would encounter in Norse mythology. So if you're looking for the likes of Odin or the Valkyries in this book is not for you. It's more about fairy tale, in the worst sense of the word, creatures, your troll, your fiery mare, that kind of thing, things that you would find in European folklore. And the society in Uppsala has a house in which the characters come together. Most of them will also live there, and the society is then contacted for every single adventure there is by someone who says, oh, there is something going on, or there is a Vaesen, or something weird is happening in a place. You know, the normal haunted house story, and when you go there you actually encounter a Vaesen. Vaesen by definition are neither good nor bad. They're not evil. They are just beings that can do things which humans can either find threatening or that are actually threatening to humans, but not necessarily by intention. That's the setting. The system is a D6 system where you get dice pools that are made up of your own stats, your abilities, but also certain talents that you may have. The talents are interlinked with the archetype that you're playing. There are several archetypes in the book. So for example, there is the doctor, there is also the servant, there is the academic, and each of them has a couple of benefits that come with that particular archetype. And in addition to that kind of setup, which is, you know, your normal stat setup that you might find in other games like Call of Cthulhu even, where you can also play archetypes. In the 7th edition, there are even, you know, like little packages for each archetype that you can choose, and then you just play it out of the box without having to roll for anything. You also have to choose relationships between the characters. That's very important. And they can take all kinds of things. So for example, I see you in my dreams could be one of those relationships, which is a fairly neutral one, but it can mean all of my dreams that I have in which you occur are nightmares, or all of the dreams that I have in which you occur are actually wonderful dreams because I'm in love with you. So a lot of them are quite neutral on the surface, and you can turn them into whatever you like. It is made clear in the game description, however, that you have to be aware that at the end of the day, no matter which relationships you choose, you still have to form a group that can work together, that can travel together. If everybody is constantly at war with each other, the system won't work and you can't play the game. So they're making this really clear. The system itself is quite easy to handle, very well described. It does handle combat in a way that would make it mandatory, for me at least, to either use miniatures or to use Roll20 if you're playing online, because it does deal with being able to walk around certain obstacles, jumping over them, or walking through obstacles, depending on what they are. So as soon as a combat system gets that concrete, I tend to whip out my miniatures or use Roll20, because otherwise I would just skip over that kind of combat. We have played one session. We also had a session, a separate session, where we created the characters. The people who are playing it are really, really experienced role players that know very many different systems. The first thing we noticed is that the dice pool system, where you only roll d6s and only a 6 is a success, meant that in most cases we didn't have a single success. Somebody in the game round also likened it to Coriolis, where apparently the same system is at work, where you basically roll d6s and only a 6 is a success, and the number of successes is very low, and most rolls end in a complete failure. Which of course is a problem. Not only is it frustrating, but also it means that the story will stall if you base it too much on dice rolls. And I saw that at the very beginning, because in the beginning you can purchase, based on your credit score, let's call it that, your equipment. But I only roll 2 dice in my case, and once they're rolled, it's kind of like the credit's gone. And if you don't manage to buy anything, at least that's how we interpreted the rules, that's it. You can't get anything else. So I decided against it, because there was simply no point, because you know, I'm not gonna waste my credit, because chances are I'm not going to get anything. And after the character creation phase, I actually rolled my credit rating 3 times, and each time I didn't score a single success. That was pretty much the story for all of our characters during the game, that even very simple rolls where you would expect in the situation the character to succeed, they didn't, because they never managed to get any successes. Now this could be down to us relying too much on rolling dice, and maybe we should have rolled fewer dice and role-played more. Or, well, I mean, if you're listening at doors, you can't really role-play this. The question then, of course, comes up, how important is it that the story progresses? We felt that the basic idea behind Vaesen is that it's a role-playing game that is very much based on storytelling, but it does emphasize rolling dice a lot. Again, this could be something that would change if we were to play it more often. But that brings me to the actual point that I want to make. I don't think that you need this book at all. I don't think that the system itself is in any way unique, interesting, or required to enjoy a game of Vaesen. What I like about the whole idea is the setting. And secondly, but probably most importantly, the artwork. The artwork has me captured, and it is of a kind that I, of course, can't classify because I don't know the first thing about art. But when I look at these pictures, I want to be them. I want to be in those stories. I like the fact, for example, even the display that you see here, these are two PC archetypes. You have the doctor. She is by no means the kind of person that you would normally find in any role-playing game depicted. She is fat, she is middle-aged, she is not beautiful. Likewise, the academic is actually wrinkled. We were talking the other day about how difficult it was to find pictures of unattractive characters online because everyone always looks beautiful, everyone always looks youthful. So this idea of displaying human beings in fantasy, and this is a fantasy game, it's low fantasy, but still, is actually lacking. And this is the first thing that I saw about this. Those people look like they're real. This is the occultist. She looks very grim. She is a person you wouldn't want to meet. The priest, likewise. These are people that you would expect to see in the 19th century in Sweden or Northern Europe. Then, of course, there are the depictions of Vaesen. So the graphics are incredible. I really love them, and they actually are so evocative that I could come up with a story looking just at this picture alone. So, would I play this game? Absolutely. Would I use the system? Absolutely not. Because it means for players as well who really want to get into it, to buy yet another book, to learn yet another system, to immerse themselves in yet another rule set. And the rule set itself isn't really convincing to me. It looks easy on the surface because you only roll d6s, but it just doesn't convince me. I like the fact that they force you to build relationships between the characters from the start, because especially when a group is new to role-playing, and I don't think that they should be starting with this necessarily, but if they're new to role-playing, this idea of saying, okay, you are a group, why are you together, what are your relationships, can help. If you are an experienced role-playing group, then even before we started, I had created my character and somebody else had created their character. And then a second tranche of people, as it were, created their characters because we did it on 2 different evenings. And then one of them said, so basically, what are you playing? And I said, well, I'm playing this. And she said, okay, well, then because I'm playing this. And I said, well, there could be a reason why we know each other. So we did this even before we went into the details of what is your relationship with whom, because it just comes naturally to us. But that's because we have been playing together for a very long time. And then, of course, somebody else was like, oh, well, you actually need a servant. So I will be looking after you. I will be your servant. I will be the butler. And I said, okay, brilliant. Yeah, I've always wanted a butler. Super. So that's basically how it works if you're playing with people that you already know. But if you don't, then this helps. And you could basically lift this off out of this book and use it in a different setting. So what I would do is I would actually take this. I love the ideas. I love the graphics, of course, and also the kind of Vaesen that they throw at you. So here you've got a giant, for example. And it also explains to you what kind of conflicts you can run into with this particular creature. It also tells you what kind of ritual could be employed to get rid of this creature. So, for example, for a giant to be banished, as it were, you just have to ring church bells. So it says here, giants flee at the sound of church bells, although they may try to raise the church by hurling boulders at it. So you might want to be careful there. A person who manages to raise a cross or sprinkle holy water near a giant's dwelling can drive it into the wilderness. Some giants turn to stone if a human calls them by their true name. So these give you a couple of ideas even how an encounter with a giant could work. And so you've got all of these. And then, even for the graphics, you should, of course, buy this book. And then, of course, you can make your own Vaesen. It explains to you how to do this. And then it explains how the whole storytelling aspect of it works. So the story that you're telling is essentially the mystery. And in the mystery, you have the Vaesen that needs to come in. You have to have conflicts. So, for example, someone wants something from the creature. Someone has taken something from the creature. Someone is exploiting the creature's powers. And for those of you who are familiar with Beyond the Wall pretty much relies on tables where you can roll and then build your story from there. So basically, there is a fairy court. Somebody has taken something from the fairy court. This something is now someplace else. The fairies want it back. They cross over into the world, and so on and so forth. What is it? Who has got it? What happens? And there are tables to roll on to get all of this. And this is pretty much how this works as well. So this book also serves as a toolbox for building your own storytelling, for building your own story by giving you little pieces that you can put together like a jigsaw. Then, of course, you have the misdeed. The primary conflict has already begun when the player characters arrive and something has happened that catches their interest and prompts them to leave Uppsala and investigate the matter. So this is how it works. Then, of course, they have to start thinking about what do I have to bring, blah, blah, blah. And then there is this kind of like preparatory phase. And in a way, I didn't really feel that this contributed to the story, because then you're supposed to be doing things that give you advantages later. But I just find that really forced, because that's basically when you put on a structure onto a story rather than saying, okay, you have that develop naturally. But again, it could be because they're trying to make it easy for new players. So basically here it gives you the structure of the mystery, the prologue, the invitation that is sent to you, because basically your society is approached, then the preparations and the journey. So potential means of transportation, an example of a flavor text of the journey, then when you arrive, and here you even have like a little bit of a diagram. So this game book could be useful for anyone who wants to run any sort of game, because these are basic structure items you would find when telling a story. So if you are an experienced game master, or if you have a system that you already like, you really don't need this book unless you want to see the art. If all of this applies to you, then all you need, in my opinion, is this book. It's called A Wicked Secret and Other Mysteries. This book essentially contains 4 mysteries that you can play. So you get the invitation, you get a really lovely maps. I love the maps as well as the art. And you can just, basically you have your NPCs, you have your floor plans, clues, and of course your Vaesen, and then the aftermath, and then the end. And I think that you can play this with any system. I was talking to a friend last night about this actually, and she suggested that she could envisage this being played using something called Apocalypse Monster of the Week by Evil Hat. So I checked it out today. Unfortunately, Evil Hat do not ship outside of the United States, and the book itself is unavailable in Europe at the moment. But apparently it will be back in store. I do have the PDF, but I do want the book, because I hate PDFs and I hate printing them and that kind of thing. But if and when the book is back in store, I'm actually going to buy it, because this is pretty much a very freestyle kind of a system you can use for anything. You could also, and I totally can see myself using these Vaesen or these stories in a completely different world as well. I mean, this archipelago could be anywhere. You can put it into the United States, and you can play this in Call of Cthulhu Classic. You could play this in the Bookhounds of London Trail of Cthulhu. So I like the idea. I like the concept behind it. The Vaesen themselves are not necessarily Swedish. I mean, some of these do remind me of Sleepy Hollow. I mean, a werewolf isn't a Swedish thing. So you could also lift them completely out of the setting and place them in a different world. You could even place them in a different time. But if you want to play some kind of low fantasy game like this, you really don't need the rule book. You can just take this book. I would recommend it though, because of the art, because the art is really something that speaks to me. I really enjoy it, but I also know that, of course, beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, and some people may not like it at all. If you are interested, it is published by Free League. It retails, actually it doesn't say how much it costs, which is strange, but I think I paid 150 euros for everything, including the Game Master screen and shipping, I think was, I'll have to check maybe. No, 127.91. Shipping was free. And it is a nice book, a nice series of books. The quality is really high. The paper feels thick and nice between the fingers. I will have to talk about the term Nordic horror though, because I think it is one of those terms that is being overused. Suddenly everything is Nordic horror. Last year I introduced you to a game called A Town Called Malice, which was also supposed to be a game about Nordic horror. The two games couldn't be any more different from the ideas and how they are played. I would argue that A Town Called Malice is a lot more like Beyond the Wall, in that you build the town together, that you choose from the archetype, that you choose your NPCs, you place them, etc. But again, there isn't anything Nordic about it because you could place it anywhere. There is even a supplement playing A Town Called Malice on a space station called Malice, so there is nothing Nordic about it. Here, again, I would argue the only thing that makes it Nordic is the fact that it's based in Sweden. But just because something happens in Sweden, it's not necessarily Nordic horror. I would even argue it's not horror. So if you're kind of going, okay, can I play this? Is it too horrific? It isn't. It can be very horrific depending on what you make of it, how you use it, what is okay for your group. You can turn this into a bloody massacre if you like, but you can do this with anything. If you're looking for something that's specifically Nordic, I would argue, I don't even know what Nordic horror is supposed to be, but the only thing Nordic about it is that it's set in Sweden. You will not find any Nordic heroes, like Beowulf, for example, and the Danes. You will not find any of the Norse gods in here. It's strictly more like fairy tale, common, low fantasy creatures that you find in here, like a mermaid and a kraken. There is nothing specifically Nordic about them. What stands out is the art, and I would like to point this out one more time. You can also buy these books just to look at if you are able to afford them just for that purpose. So this is Vaesen by Free League, and Vaesen, A Wicked Secret, also by Free League. Have a lovely day. Bye.